Okay, finally that music ended. It's another Thursday night, Real Monsters, with me, SK Barrett, and my co-host Wes Hobrick.
Hello, hello, hello.
And tonight we are going to cover a guy who has managed to infiltrate the zeitgeist. I don't know if that's the right word, but the consciousness of the public without people knowing very much about him.
I agree. There really isn't a whole lot if you look at documentaries on this guy. I think there is a fictionalized movie they made, but even that,
Hmm.
is basically indie and nobody saw it.
Yeah, Criminal Minds did an episode about a serial killer pig farmer, but in the on the other side of the continent uh, in the Ontario area.
Ah,
Um,
yeah.
but I mean, that was kind of where the similarities ended.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, Picton's kind of an enigmatic figure too, but we'll get into that, I'm sure. So,
All right. So, do we have some history?
a little bit.
Okay,
Couple
a little
entries
bit's
here. Let
enough.
me find it. Um, Mrs. News, again, this can all be found on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Real Monsters Podcast. The first one, which is just sad, this one was horrible. Ohio mom found guilty of killing her 3 children for what reason?
A
She felt that
boyfriend.
they were taking too much attention from her husband.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's a new low. Uh, and another new low, Jussie Smollett files a suit against Chicago for malicious prosecution.
You know, the term sleeping dogs, letting sleeping dogs lie comes to mind
Yeah,
on this one.
absolutely. I
Dude,
mean,
dude, you got away with one here pretty cleanly. Leave it
yeah,
alone.
yeah, just shut up and enjoy the spoils of that.
Yeah. The spoils
Um,
being you're walking around.
yeah, pretty much. Let's see. Investigators in Delaware they found a body of a little girl, and they issued a facial reconstruction done by computer experts and anthropologists. They are looking for any help they can get in IDing her.
Oh,
And again, that link is over on our page. If we can get that shared widely, maybe somebody out there knows who she was. Um, and
somebody
while you're,
knows.
yeah, hopefully.
Whether
While you're
they,
over there, oh, go ahead.
I mean, it's just a matter of getting the picture in front of the right eyeballs.
Penetration, indeed. Um, while you're over there, take a look at that video. Incredible, absolutely incredible from Texas, where police rescued a 8-year-old who was kidnapped. They caught the whole thing on the officer's body cam
Oh,
and
awesome.
released it. Yep. Let's see. They found Jennifer Rothwell's body. That was the St. Louis County homicide by her husband, and they dumped it pretty close to here, actually, maybe 50 miles away from where I'm at.
Hmm.
But they found her body, and they're proceeding with that. Uh, Jeffrey Epstein's guards were indicted for falsifying records after they slept on the job, basically. Um,
Like everyone knew. I
yep, pretty much.
mean, come on. Who do you think you're fooling?
Man. Uh, and then we had a 15-year-old teen without arms or legs tackled by an Arizona deputy, which they caught all that on cell phone video as well.
Yeah, nothing more threatening than a quadruple amputee.
Yeah, no shit. Man, I just like I
child.
said, one horse open sleigh to hell, man. A 9-year-old in San Diego still fighting for his life after being a victim in a murder-suicide plot hatched by his family. Um, Best of luck to him in fighting that and bouncing back, hopefully.
Yeah.
Man, a Kentucky principal who was known for crusading against what he deemed homosexual literature is now facing child porn charges. So,
Couldn't
yeah.
never saw that coming.
Project much, dude? Damn. Um, let's see. Oh, a father in Massachusetts was arrested after his son brought heroin to school. His 5-year-old son brought heroin to school and said it made him feel like Spider-Man.
I bet
I
it
didn't
did.
know. I mean, there's a warped sort of humor in that, but that made me so sad to read that. But
Well, oh, because the kid was using.
yeah, apparently, and he
Jesus,
said it made him feel that way. So
that would
Rodney
be. That's
Reed.
just that's really fucked up because a kid that small can OD just so easy.
Oh, absolutely. Thank God there wasn't any fentanyl in it. Apparently, um, Rodney Reed's execution was stayed in Texas, so good one there. I think there's some pretty compelling evidence that they ought to reopen their look at his crime that put him on death row. Um, and a couple that are rather funny, I thought that we would end on. A affidavit out of Florida where a man claims that the cocaine found in his car was blown in by the wind. So,
Yeah, yeah, that was yeah, stupid. Global warming brought it in.
yeah, exactly. The wind blowing in, officer. And then
And
the last
that and Bob
entry.
Dylan.
My blow's blowing in the wind. But yeah, the last entry I had in the Popeye's Chicken Sandwich Fight Club series, which is what I had
Jesus.
been calling it over on our Facebook page.
What
There
the
was
hell,
a
man?
there was a fight in a San Diego drive-through over the sandwich. So, yep. I think there's probably a good 10 to 15 incidents that we have been cataloging with that over there since they re-released the sandwich. But that is all I have.
It's gonna be like, man, we're gonna have chicken sandwich wars now.
Yep, I think so.
The Chick-fil-A versus Popeyes gangs roving the streets.
Well, yep, probably
All
like
right.
Mad Max world or something.
So, Willie Pickton.
Willie Pickton, Willie Stinky Picky Pickton is what they called him.
Yeah. If, by the way, if you've never been within a mile of an actual pig farm,
Hmm.
if you'd know it if you have.
Oh, absolutely. Man, it's horrible.
They
We got a bunch of them down here.
they smell for such a distance, and it's so bad all the fucking time. And I personally, I think it's worse than a dairy.
Hmm.
I mean,
I
dairy farms have, their cow shit steak, but pig farms are a whole nother level.
I agree when you compare it to dairy, although I think the worst in terms of that sort of thing
Yeah.
is chicken.
See, I've never been around a large chicken farm.
My mother's side is from Minnesota, and
Okay.
there was actually a chicken farm up in Moorhead that was in our family.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm well acquainted with that smell too. But yeah, yeah, it's Robert Pickton, aka Willie. Date of birth October 26th, 1949. His family farm that we have been talking about, the pig farm that they owned, is in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. Did we have like a map
Yeah,
showing that
we
close
got a
relative to the
couple of
Pacific?
those.
Cool.
All right, so this one shows its proximity to Vancouver and the U.S. border.
So it's over there. Not loading. Oh, there we go. See it now. Um, yeah, I mean, they owned that for a little while. His sister, Linda, who is 2 years older,
Yeah.
actually did not grow up on that farm because their dad, for whatever reason, said that it's no place for a lady.
Oh, interesting.
But
But it's
also,
okay for his wife.
yeah, apparently he was never really around during their childhood, but he did manage
Mm,
somehow to say that. Um, So Pickton, he worked there a lot, and to sort of supplement his income, he also tinkered with cars for scrap, and then helped his other brother Dave, who was 2 years younger, helped him in his gravel and demolition biz.
okay.
Um, but yeah, the farm itself very isolated out there, and it started
Yeah,
off.
so this is the town currently just under 60,000. It looks to be largely a bedroom community for Vancouver,
Okay,
with a
so
little bit of
technically a
industrial
suburb.
around the edges.
That's 60,000 today.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because in terms of activity with Pickton, when he was an active killer, we're talking roughly 1979 to 2002 is the actual period. Um,
Wow.
so, yeah, and he lasted quite a while,
It
and
did.
we'll get into the reasons for that too. But a old neighbor of Pickton's called him a, quote, good-natured little bastard.
That's a weird.
Yeah, bit of a backhanded compliment there, if you will. Um, let's see. And a couple other things that they did. Their farm was about 600 and some odd acres up until 1978 when they had a bad fire on it. And they actually ended up selling off most of it to where there was only, I think, about 60 or 6.5 acres left. So it dramatically shrunk it, but still.
Huh.
Um, and because of that, when they sold that off, Pickton and his siblings got about $2 million from
Oh,
it.
shit. That's not bad.
Yeah, it's not a bad take at all. And after that, because even before they did that, Willie was known for throwing these lavish, basically orgies, drug fueled orgies, in a barn there that he called the Piggy Palace.
Oh, man.
And another way that they would get cash from that, they would actually charge admission too, him and Dave. So you got to get Pickton, while his IQ was only about 80,
Yeah.
he was a pretty shrewd guy, I think, in different ways.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. You know, it's not uncommon to have people who are, significantly below average intelligence, but have a lot of cunning.
hmm Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, definitely. But yeah, they did that. They would throw the parties, and then after the $2 million came in,
Yeah.
they also started a nonprofit called the Piggy Palace Good Times Society. I'm not totally sure what that was for. Maybe just like a tax shelter or something.
Right.
But yeah, they did that.
Wonder who they
I mean,
donated to besides
well,
themselves.
themselves. Yep. But yeah, there were upwards of like 1,700 people at these parties most of the time when he would throw them. Um, but getting a little bit more into the family life in his background, his father, like I said, wasn't really involved in raising the kids. His mom, Louise, was a workaholic and basically ran the farm for them. Um,
Okay.
and there was, quite a lot of really sad stuff. It really kind of makes you empathize with the guy that happened around this time because he's already got his subpar intelligence working against him, but his mother didn't exactly encourage hygiene. In fact,
Yeah.
Pickton had a lifelong phobia of showers, literally, because Louise said you can only take baths.
No, that doesn't make a phobia.
I don't know, man. I mean,
I
if
mean,
she was tough enough in saying it and scared him enough.
yeah, but there's got to be some negative reinforcement on that as well.
Yeah, and another thing, I think he also didn't exactly do the hygiene thing because the smells kind of comforted him. You know,
Hmm.
the smells of the farm, it's like home for him. Well, it is home, but um, yeah, she expected Dave and Willie to work long hours every single day. Um, and when Willie would want to hide from her, he would literally crawl inside the carcass of a hog.
That's
Yeah,
that's desperate times, man.
it really is. I mean, it really is. It made me empathize with the guy
Yeah,
somewhat. But another really pivotal thing that happened when he was about 12, he was saving his money and he bought a calf at auction.
yeah,
And he was, raising it. It was basically his pet and his friend. He poured so much love into it. And then he comes home one day from school to find out that the calf is gone. And he asks Louise, well, where'd it go? And she says, the barn, meaning it's slaughtered. So he walked in there and, he saw that. And a lot of people that knew him kind of consider that the watershed moment where any empathy for a fellow creature that he did have, he
yeah,
lost,
yeah.
as it were, because he never forgot that. If you look at his history and
Would you
the
say he
people
was
who,
what, 12?
about 12,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah.
So,
Those are formative years, man.
hmm oh, it really
One of the
is.
things that happens in the brain as we're developing as children is there's actually the brain actually prunes off unused pathways to make
hmm
itself more efficient. And
hmm
one of the periods that this happens is around age 12. And
Yep.
this is why if you get somebody who moves to a new country
hmm
with a new language, you
hmm
can pretty much tell if they moved before or after the age of 12, whether or not they have still have remnants of an accent.
hmm Yeah, because those are part of the pathways.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, when neuroplasticity is in really high gear, um, definitely.
So
But
this would be a kind of event that would have been really um, reinforced, um,
hmm
very traumatic, and then reinforced just through the brain development.
absolutely. But
So
yeah, you,
there was a story about the mom that I found in that article that you sent to me.
oh, I was actually getting to that, but yeah,
The one
yeah.
about the the brother Dave.
hmm
Um,
Did
so
you want to tell that or me?
yeah, yeah, I'll tell this.
Okay, cool.
So Dave was learning to drive. He was 16 years old. Oh, he just got his license and he went out in the evening and he hit a boy that was walking along the road and
hmm
injured him really badly. And he went back to the farm to get his mom and
Unclear whether he drove or walked back there.
right.
Yeah.
But his mom shows up and sees this boy severely injured on the shoulder of the road
hmm
and she rolls him into the fucking ditch.
A ditch with water in it
a ditch
too.
with water in it where he drowned.
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
boy
Meanwhile, the
wasn't
parents are
dead.
freaking out. Yeah.
The boy wasn't dead until she put him in the ditch, and then she just calmly walks home.
Hmm.
So, there's a lot of discussion about whether sociopathy is inherited, and I think this is a sign, an indication that, yeah,
Yeah. And that's one thing I was wondering too, whether she had a personality disorder or APD, as you suggested. She certainly sounds like the type, and one who would have drifted to business, as we know many sociopaths do.
the interesting thing is she was never charged with any crime in this.
Nope.
Dave did some time in juvie because of the accident, but that was it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, he didn't do a whole lot. And then the inquest ruled it accidental death. So I'm not sure how they would get that. But yeah, I mean, that was really formative, I think, on Willie as well. Basically seeing mom get away with murder.
Right?
Man.
I mean, what could you not get away with then?
Hmm. You see yourself as invincible because she was. Uh, um, yeah, it was around age 14 when Pickton dropped out of high school, dropped out of the special education, because that's where he was through much of that. Um, and he ended up working as a meat cutter, where he perfected his skills at dissecting. And that was for about 7 years. And then in 1970, he returned to the farm to work full time.
That must have been a hard decision.
Hmm.
I mean, you know, I don't. There's not much discussion about what the relationship is between mom and the boys,
Hmm.
but it can't be good.
Yeah, I would I would think it might have been kind of like Ed Gein's
Yeah.
relationship out there, just not as turned up to 11 as that was, a little bit more cold maybe.
Hmm.
But yeah, during this whole time, Picton, he never dated, although allegedly he had an American pen pal named Connie, and they were engaged for a while, and those plans fell through.
Once they
Uh,
met.
yeah, in fact, it actually was. He spent about 5 weeks engaged to her down in Pontiac, Michigan, and then he returns to the farm. She never visits. So, and according to people who knew both of them and to Picton, they never had sex. So, there was nothing of a physical nature, I guess you could say there.
Yeah.
Uh, is just looking through the rest of that. In 1992, he was charged with sexual assault for the first time, and then in 1997 there was a charge of imprisonment and I believe stabbing a sex worker, damn near fatally.
Whoa.
But again, he got off of that because the complaining witness was addicted to heroin and didn't show up. So they never
Ah.
pursued it.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I don't. We've seen that
Yeah.
so often with people we've profiled on this show.
Well, on the one, it's a combination of factors. One being a sex worker, uh,
Hmm.
and two being a drug addict. Uh,
Yep.
and when they talk about unreliable witness, some of that unreliability is just fucking showing up.
Hmm. Oh, absolutely.
And because if they don't show up, you got nothing. You got no case.
Right. No complaining witness, so no case. In a lot of ways, he's very similar to Robert Hansen, too.
Yeah, yeah.
When you look at it, that victimology, and then again, the cops having him on their radar and not doing anything about it until the last minute. And let's see, 1978, there was a rather nasty fire at the farm, and it was close to then that actually both of his parents died. And Robert ended up nursing Louise through her final days. Not sure how
Um,
he got stuck with that.
and what was her affliction?
Oh, good question. I didn't find that actually.
Oh, it's okay.
I think it might have been natural or somewhere close to that. Um, but yeah, that is really his background. And then you get into it. His main hunting area was the east side of Vancouver,
Okay.
which they called the Low Track. And there's an interesting quote about that. I'm just digging for it. A journalist really summed it up. He called it the biggest concentration of human misery in the developed world.
Well, that was then. Now we have San Francisco.
Close second, maybe. But yeah, it's basically, a red light district. And in a lot of the bars down there, Robert, because he had money, I would assume, was essentially a god. He could go
Right.
there, he could get offered sexual favors from the prostitutes and what have you.
Well,
And that's what
it's
kept him.
true that, you know, even though he had money, it wasn't going to get him very far in the more middle class and upper middle class areas because his hygiene was so awful and his intelligence was so low.
Hmm.
So he had
Yeah.
to, he had to go where he could fit in better.
Hmm. Oh, most definitely. Get pulled to that like a magnet. Um, yeah, what initially
And it also
kind of.
turns out that that's an area where there's a lot of people that can disappear without anybody noticing.
Oh, yes. And that's, another thing that we saw in the Robert Hansen case. A
Hmm.
lot of it was shrugged off because of the transient nature
Yeah.
of sex work. Because these were all basically prostitutes, full time or part time, because they needed drugs.
Right.
And that gets into Hansen's MO. He would offer them drugs and then take them back to his trailer on the farm, or he would just straight up pay them. Um, let's see, and it was definitely neglected because of that. And when he would get them there, usually what he would do is cuff them and rape them. And then after that, he would strangle them,
Yeah.
usually with wire, or he would sometimes shoot them with a 22.
Hmm.
Um, and then from there, he would butcher the bodies in basically the same way that he would butcher a hog. And there's a lot of implications with that too. In fact, the Canadian government warned several times about the possibility of human meat on his farm because of that it got into the food supply.
After he was caught, I'm assuming.
Yes, yes, I saw warnings from '04, 2015, and 2016. I'm not sure why that delay, though. That didn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
So they're saying that he sold human meat as pig meat?
Well, they were saying that that was essentially accidental contamination because of how he disposed.
Did he not feed them to the pigs?
He did with a lot of them, but not all of them.
Okay.
That was, as you said, his sort of favorite way to dispose. His favorite antecedent behavior, as it's called in criminological circles. But other ones, he would take a reciprocating saw, bisect the skull, and then cut off a lot of the meat from the corpse and run them through the meat grinders that he had.
Mm.
And then from there, he would take them to what's called a rendering plant, which they would use the different waste products from a bunch of different animals there for things like beef tallow, soap, and what have you. So I was curious with that about some of the processes
And here
that
you
happen
go.
at a typical. Yeah, we have a flow chart of that, of
Uh,
more of the generalized. That's it. They would bring the meat in, ground up, put it into the grinder, then into the disintegrator, which would boil it
hmm.
from there back into the rendering system. The centrifuge would spin out everything but the protein, and they would evaporate it, and that's where you get the protein. And then also the fats and oils from that. But yeah, after a few different studies that went on, the government ended up basically saying that it was um, a possibility that they could not rule out, but it was negligible
Yeah, I would
that
imagine.
any of it was contaminated. So, yeah, Michelle says rendering smells so bad. Used to work at a packing plant. I can only imagine with that.
Yeah.
Jeez. And there was a couple other stories. I wasn't able to confirm it, though, that he allegedly fed some of his victims to police and then also to some of the people that would show up for the parties on the farm. There was one witness who
Well,
said that he
what
had a
would be the
special fridge.
what would be the circumstances for feeding police?
I can only speculate with something like that. Maybe they were somewhere near and they bought, pork from him or what have you.
Okay.
And they really didn't elaborate much on that in the sources I had, so probably can't put too much stock in it. But there are actually a couple of killers who we know forcibly fed their victims to people.
Right.
Ones that we might look at for next time. You could almost call them Sweeney Todd killers. And I think Pickton could still, he's kind of a quasi Sweeney Todd killer, but he had Nathaniel Barjona who fed a 10-year-old to his neighbors. And the
Wow.
weird thing with that,
Yeah.
his mother, he escaped charges on that because the boy's mother believed her son was still alive. Again, they didn't have a complaining witness, so there was nothing they could do. Um, and then you had Joe Matheny in Maryland who fed his victims to customers of his roadside barbecue stand after turning them into burgers.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
Now fish fed I think fed some meat to other people.
Really?
I think so.
I don't remember seeing that, but maybe. I mean,
It
I
it
definitely
wasn't a it
trust.
wasn't a major part. I mean, fish had so much crazy ass shit going on that one would hardly even register.
Yeah. Oh, you're definitely right on that, man. But yeah. So what ends up happening there? I have a spot here about the investigator who is really interesting in herself, or himself now. She's actually a transsexual.
Okay.
Started off as Lori Shenher. She was the lead constable tasked with investigating the growing numbers of missing Vancouver sex workers in 1998, which that number around the time Pickton was arrested was up to 60 missing.
See, this is a thing. This is a thing about them is it takes astonishing numbers before anybody starts to pay any attention.
Hmm. Oh, especially with sex workers,
Yeah, that's not.
unfortunately.
Yeah, sex workers and homeless people, and if you're, a dozen can go missing and nobody even blinks an eye.
Yep. It's sad, man. I mean, we see that dynamic over and over again with this
Yep.
stuff. She was only a few days into her job in 1998 when someone called their tip line and they first suggested Pickton as a suspect. This person allegedly had been told by somebody that there were bloody clothes and all these other different stuff that they saw on his farm, but that was never, followed up.
Didn't he have a collection of purses? I th-
Um,
I thought I remembered that.
that I didn't see, but
No,
I mean,
there's nothing about it here. It's just something that's kind of stuck in my head that they had a pile of purses,
mm-hmm.
but
I mean,
I may be misremembering that or thinking of something else.
and the way that I understood it with what this person was told, it wasn't so much a purposeful collection that they saw,
Yeah.
but sort of haphazard,
Okay.
shit thrown around. But maybe I misinterpreted that. I'm not sure.
No, it could be. No, you could be right. Um, I'm not seeing any references to any, you know,
Mm-hmm.
trophy uh, fetish in particular.
Mm-hmm.
There's no hair or jewelry or anything that he keeps from everyone.
Oh yeah. Um, but yeah, Shenher struggled throughout to get the adequate resources for this. In between 98 and '02, there were 12 additional victims. Um, And also between that, she reported all these different symptoms. She was getting sick, damn near a nervous breakdown, and she was plagued by nightmares of women's hands slipping from her grip. Um,
Hmm.
Pretty brave investigator. And she ended up leaving the unit in 2000 and starting a book, in fact, in 2002 after he was caught. Which the way that that happened was interesting. They had a weapons charge that the Royal Canadian Mounted Police was out there investigating. And they ended up finding a inhaler on the property that belonged to one of the victims.
Oh.
And that is what led them to get another warrant and expand the search for everything that they were looking for, you know. And
It's the little shit that trips you up, man.
it really is. But it's interesting. They had a couple of basically studies or like committees that looked at this investigation after it happened,
Yeah.
and the government's quote on it was interesting. They had, man, where did I write that at? Oh, well, we might get to that. It was a pretty dire indictment of it, though, because they went through, so much wasted resources and stupid investigative leaps, if you will. So there's a, and
Hmm.
in fact, Shenher, because of all of that,
Yeah.
she started writing that book of hers, The Lonely Section of Hell. And she started writing it because she also believed that the government was willfully withholding information as to how bad they screwed up on Pickton.
Well, yeah, that's organisms protect themselves, don't they?
They definitely do, man. Bureaucracies, it's really all that they do well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Protect themselves and grow.
But the other issues that Shenner pointed out, there was turf wars, because the area where the farm was at was under RCMP jurisdiction,
Okay.
but then you had the Vancouver PD in this too. It took them years to cooperate on Pickton to get something done.
Wow.
And that was, another big problem. And then the flawed investigative procedures was another thing that Schenner pointed out. Um, but, one good thing that did come out of a lot of this, because at Pickton, his MO was he wasn't just grabbing within his own race. There
Hmm.
was about, I think it was a dozen of the women that he grabbed were Aboriginal
Okay.
up there. And this was actually a larger problem in all of Canada, that where they set up a um, committee again, or an initiative that was just for missing and murdered Aboriginal women. 1,181 killed or missing from 1980 to 2012 in
Wow.
Canada. Considering how small their population already is,
Yeah,
that's something.
that's substantial. I mean, the Canadian population to begin with, but then the Aboriginal population, which is much smaller.
Hmm. Oh yeah. Um, and as the disappearance numbers went up, more and more police thought serial. And Schenner, to her credit, she thought it was Pickton basically the whole time.
Wow.
Uh, so
And she was right.
she was, man. Well,
Yeah,
he was right, but
she was right at the
yeah,
time.
definitely. Um, yeah, da 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 da. And
So,
they had another interesting witness that came out with that, and this shines a little bit more light into Pickton's MO of how he would pick them. There was a woman by the name of, I believe it was Eggleston. I
okay,
might be wrong with the name, but she was a friend of Roberts anyway, and she apparently was one of them who would help lure girls to the farm.
really?
Uh, yeah, and she says that she stopped doing this after she walked out into the barn and saw him cutting flesh off of the victim Marnie Fry as she was hanging.
So
And
that's what it took for her to stop. But did she turn him in? No.
she didn't, and in fact, Shenher tried to get her to talk but couldn't.
Mm.
And it's unclear with this one whether she knew exactly what Robert was doing with them when they got out there to the farm. But I do honestly believe her account of what she saw with him gutting her, because she said in there, I didn't know fat was yellow.
Oh,
So, yeah, it adds a little bit of credence there. Um, but she also was not the only woman that helped him. There was another one who they actually tried to bring in as well. And I think there's a compelling case that she knew what he was doing, but she was never charged. So, unfortunately, I was just looking to. Oh, there it is. I'm working with two legal pads here. So, let's see if we can find her name as well. But, this turned into being the largest forensic investigation in Canadian history.
wow.
And
I
in
don't
fact,
doubt it, because
oh,
holy
yeah,
shit, because
definitely.
it's all in one site, which is
Hmm.
unusual, right?
Oh,
You
yeah.
think about it. Um, all the cases we've covered this year, I
Hmm.
can't think of another one where all the victims are in one site.
Um, one that does come to mind with that is Herb Baumeister,
Yeah.
Fox Hollow Farm.
Well, another
Uh,
farm, yeah.
hmm. Well, not literally a farm, but they called it
Oh,
that.
right, right, yeah.
Hmm.
But
But
property. Yeah, it's just
Dinah Taylor, that was the other woman. what she liked to do with this was find them at domestic abuse shelters. And
Oh,
with her, it's kind of unclear as to whether she knew about it. But yeah, his MO, man, it escalated. It really did. After starting off with just kidnapping, basically, and false imprisonment. Um, like I said, he would often use a reciprocating saw to bisect the skulls um, when he would be done with them to prepare them for the rendering plant or feed them to the pigs. I wonder how long it takes a pig to
well, I've
do that.
heard various things, and I guess it depends on how many pigs you have
Yeah, this is true.
and how big they are, and when's the last
Hmm.
time you fed them. I think
Yeah,
there's a
this is
number of
true too.
factors, but
Still, it
I
reminds me of
understand. I
Hannibal.
understand it's in the nature, in the range of, a couple hours
Hmm.
to come.
Oh, Michelle says, I've heard 8 minutes.
What? That's eating like a pig, man.
Pun intended. Wow. But, and before he escalated, he would often bring female quote unquote friends to the farm. Allegedly, he never had sex with any of them either. Again, probably because he stunk so bad. Man. But,
Well, so how much of that? But he did have sex with some of the sex workers. I'm assuming, since he paid for it.
uh, he might
Not that
have. I think.
not that every person who hires a sex worker hires them actually for sex. That's a well-known thing. That it's not 100%, right?
This is true. And some just like
Guys will hire them
companionship.
for all kinds of different reasons, and sex is just one of them.
Hmm. This is true. Uh, he ultimately got sloppy with the disposal too, because part of what the investigators found were various limbs and heads in buckets in his meat freezer at the farm. It's kind of unclear as to why he didn't get rid of those more thoroughly.
He could have just been devolving and just, becoming less organized.
Hmm. Yeah, it could be. But he did have the smarts to know that that's what screwed him when they got him in jail for all that. In fact, he said, "I got sloppy." But
But
yeah,
you know what? That's human nature. Actually, when you when you get away with something, you start to think you're going to always get away with it.
hmm builds that sense of invincibility.
Yeah. I mean,
Absolutely.
we do it with our driving every day, right? Every day you drive and you don't die in an accident. Um, we do stupid shit when we drive. I mean, every day. We drive too close, we don't signal, we do, don't look careful enough, and every day that we don't have an accident or we think, well, I guess I can do that.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Um, but yeah, I mean, the guy was otherwise a pretty well dyed in the wool sadist who liked to dominate women. If it, I guess, take back that power that was denied him as a child.
Ah, man.
But um, yeah, in fact, there was another witness that came forward, a guy by the name of Bellwood, who said that he also saw Pickton play acting his murders, where he was acting like he was strangling women on his bed. Um, so that's another thing to
Oh,
add
that's
in
weird.
there. And then they also found, as part of the search of the property, another thing that ties into his sexuality that they found.
Yeah.
It's a 22 pistol with a dildo on the front of it. Not even kidding.
What?
You can't make that shit up, man. They found that. And it
Uh,
had his DNA on it and the DNA of one of the victims.
oh man.
Um, but yeah, and then they ended up finding the DNA of 33 women on the farm.
Didn't they also find some male DNA?
A male that was murdered?
Yeah, I was looking.
I didn't see that, but I mean, maybe I missed a source that had that.
Lab during the trial, lab staff testified that about 80 unidentified DNA profiles, roughly half male and half female, have been detected on.
Oh, damn. Wow. No, I didn't see that. I don't know what his motivation would be for killing a guy, though. Unless he just did it purely as a way to, like, eliminate a witness.
Or maybe, who knows, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't think the guy was gay. I don't think Pickton
No,
was
no, I
gay,
don't think so
so.
either. But he might have, you know, out of opportunity, found some homeless guy
Hmm.
or
It,
some junkie guy to just to practice on, or just because he liked to kill people.
it could be. In fact, another way that he would kill besides strangling and shooting, there was a couple of them that he allegedly injected with windshield wiper fluid. Those were the heroin junkies. And that comes from, again, what he told a separate witness.
Now, depending on the formulation, that could be ammonia, a high percentage of ammonia
Wow,
in the windshield wiper fluid.
man. Basically burn your veins, or what would that,
Yeah,
do you
that
know what
would.
exactly it'd do?
I don't know exactly, but it sure is nasty shit to breathe.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing it breaks down your soft tissue.
Hmm. Man, when I was in high school, I worked at an architectural firm doing like a bunch of gopher type stuff for basically anything they needed. And one big thing that was my responsibility to do was copying blueprints.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Shitload of ammonia with that.
Right? Yeah, we had a.
Yep.
I was in a drafting class and we had a blueprint machine. Yeah.
Man.
So we have a question in the chat asking, do we think his mom sexually abused the boys? Um,
I,
there's no evidence of that I'm aware of.
mm-hmm.
Nobody has made that allegation, even the
Yeah,
boys.
mm-hmm.
Um, I would say, you know, directly no, but emotionally, the way I think the mom just fucked him in the head when it came to sex.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that assessment wholeheartedly. There's no evidence that she sexually abused them, but now there was, in certain quarters, they said that the dad was abusive when he was around. But then Linda, the sister, said no, he wasn't.
Yeah, she thought he was an okay guy.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of an open ended question there. I don't know if we'll ever really be able to answer it. Um, so, I mean, she was definitely controlling as hell, and that, I think, is a huge part of what formed his sexuality, trying to get that control back. Um, and interestingly, despite his low IQ,
Yeah.
he actually really liked learning. He studied agriculture for a time when he was behind bars
Oh.
through correspondence courses. Uh,
Yeah, it's a real tragedy how these um, parents with mental problems just pass it on to their kids, and then the kids, have to deal with it in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, frankly, the mother was technically a murderer because she killed that 14-year-old boy, um,
Mm-hmm.
and without even looking back. She just, just like, oh, you ran. She treated this boy like roadkill.
Oh yeah, literally.
Um, and you know, I can't even imagine the kind of shit she pulled on her own kids if that's what she'd do to, a dying boy on the side of the road.
Mm-hmm.
And
You know, it. Oh, go ahead.
no, it's just that here's a guy who probably was pretty normal until except for the fact that he lived with this woman
Mm-hmm.
growing up.
Yeah, and in fact, he said of his mother that they were like, quote, two peas in a pod.
Well, that's what that kind of
So,
mother demands.
mm-hmm. Just like Augusta Gein.
Yes, you will be the way I decide that you're going to be,
Mm-hmm.
and you do not have a choice in that matter.
My way or the highway.
It's
Two
not
turned
even
up to
that.
11.
Yeah, there's no option. They don't even give you that option.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, Pickton was a highly fatalistic guy too. An interesting quote from him I pulled from an article. You're only here today, you're not here tomorrow. It's kind of how he lived his life. But
yeah,
quite a few shrinks also said he wasn't a narcissist. He was frequently self-effacing as well, saying of himself quite often, I'm just a pig man.
mm.
So, I mean,
Well, and Michelle makes another good point. She says, "What gets me is how many people are abused but don't use that as an excuse and live productive lives." And this is true.
mhm,
Um, there's um, you the stuff that you live with growing up. You pretty much make a binary choice on your environment, and that is to either accept it or reject it.
mhm.
And
It,
I think that's the major deciding point on whether you're going to, you know, try to put an end to it at yourself or whether you're going to perpetuate it.
well said. Definitely. It is interesting how some people are able to do that and others just aren't. Others just can't cope and they find, violent ways
Yeah.
to lash out and to get rid of their hurt and their
I think I
powerlessness.
think in order to reject it, I think you have to have something else to compare it to.
True. Very true.
Otherwise, you just think, well, this is my life. This is what's normal for me.
Mm-hmm.
And if you
It,
never have something to compare it to, I mean, if you do get something to compare it to, then you can, in your mind as a young person, go, hey, this shit that I'm living with is no good. I don't like it, and I'm going to make it stop.
it's very true. No way to know what's out there if you haven't seen it or heard about it in some form.
Right. And so
No
in the case,
perspective.
right. And in the case of the Pickton boys, mom made sure they were too busy to experience anything else.
Which gets into Dave as well and a question about him. A lot of people have wondered whether he was not an accomplice with that he
Right.
was never charged.
Right.
Um,
What's the evidence?
it, as far as I know, there really isn't any tying him.
Okay.
So they never charged him with anything. But yeah, they came to the farm on February 5, 2002, serving that weapons warrant, and that's when they ended up arresting Pickton. And for 11 hours, they interrogated this guy, and he didn't crack at all. So what do they end up doing? They end up putting an undercover cop in the cell with him. And
Ah.
basically just snap of the fingers, he confessed and said, my goal was to kill 50, but I haven't got there yet.
Hmm.
So, he's the guy who's prone to sort of braggadocio, too.
Right.
But he was evidently smart enough not to do that around police.
That he knew of.
Yeah, that's a good point, too, because he had to know he was being tape recorded in that cell, that they had a camera on him.
Yeah, it's well, he wasn't the brightest bulb.
Yeah, this is true. He was shrewd, though.
Yeah.
But they ended up with a 27 count indictment against Pickton, and the judge, James Williams, dismissed one of those for lack of evidence, and then he decided to do a severance with the cases to where they tried him on 6 and then they saved the 20, which I'm not totally sure how they decided which they would do with that, what their criteria was. But yeah, that's what they did.
They split it into two groups.
Yep, 2 separate trials. They
That's
said that length and detail is what behooved them to do that.
okay.
But like I said, I'm not sure what criteria they were using to decide which ones belonged in which trial. But it ended up just 6 and then 20. And one thing that I honestly did not get about that,
Yeah.
they they didn't find him guilty of second degree murder on those 6. They found him guilty of first.
Hmm.
Or excuse me, they found him guilty of the lesser serious offense with that because they said they couldn't prove premeditation
Okay.
was the big thing. Um, but that got him a
Doesn't
sentence.
the numbers kind of indicate premeditation?
Yeah, I would
Oh,
think
I
giving him
accidentally
drugs
killed
would.
40 women.
Well,
That's,
exactly.
I don't see how that could fly legally or logically.
It's Canada too, so.
Well, there's that.
um, but yeah, they found him guilty on that. They gave him uh, basically life, but no possibility of parole for 25 years, which is the harshest sentence they could give him. Um, but another interesting thing with that, they thus far haven't decided to try him on the 20, which I'm not totally sure why. Because the victims' families were getting, I think, justifiably pissed about that.
Yeah.
Because the Crown, they never brought that up. They never tried him on the other 20 to this day.
That just seems bizarre. Bizarre.
Yeah. I mean, I
You
understand.
split up. You split it out to begin with, probably to
Mhm.
make it easy to get an initial conviction,
Yeah.
and you just don't even bother with the rest of it because
I
he's
mean,
in jail, and that's all. Uh,
that's
now,
essentially the reason they gave in the one article I saw on that.
like he's not going to get any more jail time,
Hmm.
so why
So we're
bother?
not going to try him. That's essentially what they said. I agree with you. It's bullshit. I would be pissed too if it were a member of my family.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, maybe they'll do that if they had enough pressure, but apparently the 60 missing women and the government basically calling the investigation a clusterfuck wasn't enough pressure. Um, yeah, Michelle says maybe it was a cost saving move. Yeah, I think it was definitely a cost saving move, but still, it's
He's
not the
like,
moral
you
move.
got one job to do.
Yeah,
I mean,
basically.
literally, you've got one job to do.
It, you know, it, Arguably, I think you could say that the United States government is more anal about costs than the Canadians tend to be. And I can't say I've ever heard of that happening here. Have you?
No. No, they'll
Where,
go if they have a big show trial like this would be, they'll spend any amount of money.
hmm Oh, yeah. But I mean, even after they're put away, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and they discover more, I've never heard of that happening over here.
I mean, the only thing that I could think that comes to mind is like a case like Bundy where he's got the death sentence.
hmm
There's not much point in, trying him for some of these other cases
hmm
because
Yeah.
he gonna die. You,
Yeah.
you can't you can't punish him any more than what he's already gonna be punished.
And it's very true.
So
Um,
in those cases, that's one where you really can't do more.
hmm Yeah,
So
you can't
there's
hit a higher bar.
no, so there was really no point in trying him for some because he was never tried for any of the Washington murders
And that's
where
true.
most of them took place up here. He
Mm-hmm.
never he was never arrested for anything up here.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. I had forgotten about his story with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there had been a push to turn the farm's property into a memorial park
Yeah.
or public cemetery. Um, the land around it had been rezoned as of 2016 too. But as far as I know, they haven't done anything to that effect with it.
Yeah, I think I mean it's not a very big town, so it's not hard to figure out where this farm was, and
Mm-hmm.
because it still bears the scars of the demolition of the old buildings.
Oh,
Uh,
definitely. And I hope they do something like that. Maybe they would get a little bit of justice to the victims if that happened. Because it sure as hell doesn't seem like the majority are going to see a day in court.
no,
So,
I just had a wild idea.
what's that?
So they said there's 80 unidentified DNA profiles that they took off of the property.
Mm
What if mommy was bad?
hmm. Yeah. I mean, he did nurse her in her final days. Maybe something finally snapped and
No,
he
no, no,
dispatched her.
no. What if mommy was a killer?
Oh. Uh huh.
Maybe that's where he learned it.
Could be.
And she's definitely had the, temperament for it.
Yeah. No doubt about that, man. She must have been cold as ice.
Yeah.
But, she also didn't care much about hygiene for herself either.
Mm.
All
Well,
about just running the farm.
yeah, I'm sure that's how that was passed on. Oh
Yep.
my word.
Yeah, he's an interesting one, most definitely. Ne-
I could have swore in the early news reports in the back in the day that um, that the brother was also involved. It seemed like that they talked about it being the two brothers working together,
hmm.
but apparently
Yeah,
not.
from what I saw, no, he wasn't. Um, yeah, I wonder what Dave's doing now, if he's still alive or what. Because Willie is.
Hmm. The dad's still alive?
As far as I know, oh no, he's
Oh,
dead.
Willie, yeah.
Yeah, Willie's still alive. But yeah. And then and the other interesting thing he did, I think it was around 2014 when he was trying to release a memoir, Pickton.
Oh, yeah.
And it pissed a lot of people off. And the Crown stepped in and said, no, you're not going to do that because we don't want you reaping any of the profits from it. Kind of similar to what Berkowitz tried to do
Yeah, they passed
over here.
laws around that shit.
Yep. Yep. So the killer pig farmer, Sweeney Todd killer #1 on this show.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, we might get to Matheny and Barjona too.
Yeah, this we will never run out of subject matter for this show.
Oh, this is true.
For one thing, they got a head start on us.
Yeah, they absolutely did. By however many thousand years of human history.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, well that's the show for tonight. Thanks for
Yeah, and I
tuning
don't.
in. Tell your friends and family and people you don't like even.
Thanks for tuning in, one and all. And I don't. We're not going to be having a show next week, Thanksgiving,
Next
right?
week's Thanksgiving. Nope.
So week after next, I
Uh,
suppose.
yep. 2
That
weeks.
sounds great.
Have a good holiday, everybody.
Enjoy as best you can.